After my mother died of cancer, my father had an affair with my aunt. My aunt despised me and kicked me out of the house, but my father said nothing, and now he is homeless and asking for my help. Part 1. The beginning of the end. My life used to be normal, or at least what I thought was normal. Growing up in a small town, I had a loving family. My mother, Mary, was the heart of our home. She had a warmth that could light up the darkest days, and her laughter was a melody that echoed through our house. My father, John, was a hardworking man, a bit stern but fair. Together, they created a safe haven for me, a place where I felt loved and protected. That all changed when my mother fell ill. It started with a cough that would not go away. At first, we thought it was just a cold, but as the weeks turned into months, it became clear that something was seriously wrong. The doctors diagnosed her with cancer, and our world was turned upside down. I watched as the disease took its toll on her, slowly draining the life out of the vibrant woman I once knew. The days grew longer and darker as my mother's condition worsened. Our once lively home became a place of sorrow and quiet desperation. My father seemed to become a different person. The stress and fear of losing my mother weighed heavily on him. He became distant, spending more and more time away from home. At first, I thought it was just his way of coping, but soon I realized there was something more to his behavior. Part 2. Discovering the affair. One evening, after another grueling day at the hospital with my mother, I came home to find my father not there. It was unusual, as he usually made an effort to be around in the evenings. I waited for hours, but he did not return. The next morning, I overheard a conversation that would change my life forever. I was in the kitchen making breakfast when I heard my father's voice coming from the living room. He was on the phone and his tone was soft, almost tender. I crept closer, trying to make out the words. "I miss you," he said. "I will be there as soon as I can." My heart sank. Who was he talking to? I had to know. Later that day, I found his phone and went through his messages. What I discovered made my blood run cold. He was having an affair with my aunt, Lisa, my mother's own sister. I felt a mixture of rage and betrayal. How could he do this to my mother, to our family? The messages were full of confessions of love and longing. They spoke about stolen moments, secret meetings, and a desire to be together. It was like a knife to my heart. I could not believe my father could do something so cruel, especially while my mother was battling for her life. The shock quickly turned into anger and disgust. I felt betrayed by the two people who were supposed to care for my mother the most. My world was falling apart, and I did not know how to handle it. Part 3. Confrontation. I knew I had to confront him. That evening, when he finally came home, I was waiting for him in the living room. "We need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked at me, surprised. "What is it, son?" "I know about you and Aunt Lisa," I blurted out. "How could you do this to Mom?" His face turned pale and he struggled to find words. "It is complicated," he finally said. "Your mother. She is not the same person she used to be." "That does not justify what you are doing," I yelled. "She is dying and you are off with her sister." He looked away, shame written all over his face. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I never meant for it to happen." Our conversation spiraled into a heated argument. I demanded to know how long the affair had been going on and why he felt the need to betray our family in such a horrendous way. His responses were evasive, filled with excuses and justifications that only fueled my anger. He claimed that he had been lonely and overwhelmed by my mother's illness, that he had found solace in Lisa's company. It was as if he was trying to shift the blame to make me understand his actions. But there was no justification for what he had done. Part 4. The breaking point. After that confrontation, things only got worse. My father and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was only to argue. My mother, oblivious to the affair, continued to deteriorate. I spent every moment I could with her, holding her hand, trying to comfort her. She was my rock, and I needed her more than ever. One night, as I sat by her bedside, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Promise me you will take care of your father," she said weakly. I nodded, my throat tight. "I promise, Mom." She passed away a few days later. The funeral was a blur of tears and condolences. My father stood by my side, but we were like strangers. Aunt Lisa was there too, her presence a painful reminder of the betrayal. I could barely look at her. The grief was overwhelming. Losing my mother was the hardest thing I had ever experienced. The house, once filled with her warmth and laughter, now felt cold and empty. The days after her death were a haze of sadness and anger. My father tried to reach out, but I could not bring myself to forgive him. The betrayal was too fresh, the wound too deep. Part 5. The aftermath. With my mother gone, the house felt empty. My father and I were like two ghosts, drifting through the rooms. I tried to keep my promise to my mother, but it was difficult. Every time I saw him, all I could think about was the affair. One evening, I overheard my father and Aunt Lisa talking in the living room. "We cannot keep doing this," my father said. It is tearing the family apart. It is too late to stop now, Lisa replied. We have come this far. I could not take it anymore. I stormed into the room, my anger boiling over. You need to leave, I shouted at Lisa. You have done enough damage. My father tried to calm me down, but I was beyond reason. You are not welcome here, I said. If you care about this family at all, you will go. Lisa looked at me with cold eyes. You cannot tell me what to do, she said. This is between your father and me. Her words cut deep. It was clear that she had no intention of leaving, and that my father was not willing to make her. I felt helpless, trapped in a situation that I had no control over. The anger and frustration built up inside me until I could not take it any longer. Part 6. The final straw. The tension in the house was unbearable. My father and Lisa continued their affair, despite my pleas and arguments. I felt like I was losing my mind. One night, I came home to find them together in the living room, acting as if nothing was wrong. It was the final straw. I packed my bags and confronted my father. I cannot stay here anymore, I said. This is not a home, not without Mom. He looked at me, a mixture of sadness and resignation in his eyes. I am sorry, son, he said. I never wanted it to come to this. I left that night with nowhere to go. I crashed on friends' couches, stayed in cheap motels, and did whatever I could to get by. It was a difficult time, but I felt a sense of relief being away from the toxic environment at home. The first few nights were the hardest. I had nowhere to call home, no place where I felt safe. I drifted from one friend's house to another, feeling like a burden. The constant moving took its toll on me, both physically and emotionally, but despite the hardships, I knew I could not go back. I could not live in a house where betrayal and lies had taken root. Part 7. Starting over. Starting over was not easy. I found a job at a local diner, bussing tables and washing dishes. It was not glamorous, but it paid the bills. I rented a small apartment and slowly began to rebuild my life. I missed my mother every day, but I tried to honor her memory by living a good life. I kept my distance from my father and Lisa. I heard through the grapevine that their relationship eventually fell apart. Lisa moved away, and my father was left alone. I felt a pang of pity for him, but I could not bring myself to reach out. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. I focused on my work, trying to save up enough money to get by. It was a simple life, but it was mine. I found solace in the routine, in the small moments of peace and quiet. Slowly, I began to heal. Part 8. A new beginning. Years passed, and I built a new life for myself. I went back to school, got a degree, and found a better job. I met a wonderful woman named Emily, and we got married. We bought a house and started a family. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly happy. One day, out of the blue, I got a call from my father. He sounded different, broken. I need your help, he said. I am homeless. I was stunned. What happened? I asked. He explained that he had lost everything. His job, his house, his savings. He had nowhere to go and no one to turn to. Despite everything that had happened, I felt a pang of compassion. He was still my father, after all. Emily and I talked it over, and we decided to let my father stay with us. It was not an easy decision, but I could not turn my back on him. He moved into our guest room, and we tried to make him feel welcome. Part 9. The reunion. At first, things were awkward. We had so much unresolved tension between us, but slowly we began to talk. He opened up about his regrets, his mistakes, and his sorrow over losing my mother. I started to see him in a different light, not just as the man who betrayed our family, but as a flawed human being who had made terrible choices. Living under the same roof brought back a flood of memories. Some were painful, but others were surprisingly comforting. We started to share stories about my mother, reminiscing about the good times. It was a way to keep her memory alive and to find common ground amidst the turmoil. Part 10. Healing. Over time, my father and I began to heal. We talked about my mother, sharing memories and stories. It was painful, but also cathartic. I realized that holding on to my anger and resentment was only hurting me. I needed to let go, not for his sake, but for my own. We attended family therapy sessions, which helped us communicate better. My father apologized for everything he had put me through, and I forgave him. It was not easy, but it was necessary for both of us to move forward. The therapy sessions were a turning point. They forced us to confront our issues head-on and to express feelings that had been buried for years. The process was challenging, but it helped us understand each other better. My father admitted to his mistakes and expressed deep regret for the pain he had caused. I, in turn, shared my own struggles and the impact of his actions on my life. Part 11. Building a new relationship. As the months went by, our relationship improved. My father became a part of our family, helping out around the house and spending time with his grandchildren. He was a different man, humbled by his experiences and grateful for a second chance. Emily and the kids grew to love him, and I started to feel a sense of peace that I had not felt in years. My father's presence in our home became a source of strength rather than a reminder of past pain. We developed new routines and traditions as a family. My father took on the role of a loving grandfather, doting on the kids and sharing stories from his past. He became an integral part of our lives, and his presence brought a sense of completeness that had been missing. Part 12. Reflecting on the past. Looking back, I realized how much I had grown through the ordeal. Losing my mother, discovering my father's affair, and being kicked out of my home had been devastating. But those experiences had also shaped me into the person I was today, stronger, more compassionate, and more resilient. I thought about my mother often, wondering what she would think of the way things had turned out. I hoped she would be proud of me, of the man I had become, and I hoped she would find some comfort in knowing that her husband and son had found a way to heal and rebuild their relationship. My father's transformation was a testament to the power of forgiveness and redemption. Despite his past mistakes, he had worked hard to make amends and to rebuild our family. It was a journey of growth and healing for both of us. Part 13. Moving forward. Life is not perfect, and there are still days when the past haunts me, but I have learned to focus on the present and the future. I have a beautiful family, a loving wife, and a father who, despite his flaws, is trying to make amends. We cannot change the past, but we can choose how we move forward. I choose to forgive, to love, and to build a life that my mother would be proud of. And in doing so, I find a sense of peace and fulfillment that I never thought possible. The journey was long and painful, but it led me to a place of healing and hope. And for that, I am grateful. My father's redemption and our renewed relationship are a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of forgiveness. As I stand here today, looking at the life we have built together, I know that my mother would be proud. Proud of the man I have become, proud of the family we have created, and proud of the love and forgiveness that have healed our wounds. The road ahead is still uncertain, but I face it with hope and strength. I have learned that even in the darkest times, there is a light that can guide us forward. And that light is the love and forgiveness that we carry in our hearts. Part 14. Building a new life. As we continued to move forward, our family grew stronger. My father, now a beloved member of our household, played an active role in our lives. He found a new purpose in helping with the kids and contributing to our home. The transformation in him was remarkable. He was no longer the distant, troubled man I had once known. He was present, engaged, and genuinely invested in our family's well-being. The kids adored their grandfather, and he reveled in their love and attention. He shared stories of his own childhood, teaching them lessons he had learned the hard way. It was heartwarming to see the bond they formed, a bond that helped to heal the wounds of the past. Emily and I continued to work on our relationship, ensuring that we communicated openly and honestly. We wanted to create a home filled with love and understanding, a place where our children could thrive. My father's presence, once a source of tension, had become a symbol of our family's resilience and capacity for forgiveness. Part 15. Embracing the future. As the years passed, we faced new challenges and joys. We celebrated birthdays, holidays, and milestones together. Each event was a reminder of how far we had come and how much we had grown as a family. My father remained a constant source of support, always there to lend a helping hand or a listening ear. We made it a point to honor my mother's memory, keeping her alive in our hearts and our stories. Her legacy was one of love and strength, and we strived to live up to the values she had instilled in us. My father, too, found ways to honor her, acknowledging the mistakes of the past and the lessons learned from them. The journey was far from easy, but it was worth every step. We had built a life filled with love, forgiveness, and hope. And as we looked to the future, we knew that we could face whatever came our way, as long as we did it together. My father and I had come full circle. From the depths of betrayal and anger to a place of healing and reconciliation, our story was one of redemption and renewal. We had learned that it is never too late to make amends, to seek forgiveness, and to build a better future. In the end, the love and forgiveness we found in each other were the greatest gifts of all. They taught us that no matter how deep the wounds, they can be healed with time, effort, and a willingness to move forward. And in that healing, we found a strength and a peace that carried us through the darkest times and into the light of a new day. My mother's wish for me to take care of my father had come true in ways I could never have imagined. By caring for him, I had also found a way to care for myself, to heal the scars of the past, and to build a future filled with hope and love. It was a journey of growth, of redemption, and of the unbreakable bond between a father and son. We continued to move forward, embracing the future with open hearts and minds. And as we did, we knew that we carried the lessons of the past with us, guiding us toward a brighter, more hopeful tomorrow. Our story was not just one of pain and betrayal, but one of love, forgiveness, and the enduring power of family. In the end, we had found our way back to each other, stronger and more united than ever before. And that, above all else, was the greatest triumph of our journey. Are you ready for the next story? My neighbor thought he owned the whole building and broke into my apartment. Part 1. The New Neighbor. My name is Tom, and I had always thought of myself as a pretty laid-back guy. I lived in a cozy apartment building in a small town, and life was good. I got along with my neighbors, kept to myself, and enjoyed the quiet that my apartment offered. That all changed when Lisa moved in. Lisa was a woman in her mid-30s, with a sharp bob haircut and a permanent scowl etched on her face. From the moment she moved in, it was clear she was going to be trouble. She acted like she owned the entire building, making demands of the landlord and complaining about the most trivial things. The first time I met her, she was already in a heated argument with Mrs. Jenkins, the sweet old lady who lived across the hall from me. "You can't just leave your shoes out here," Lisa had yelled. "This hallway is a shared space and it's a tripping hazard." Mrs. Jenkins, who had lived in the building for over 20 years, looked taken aback. "I'm sorry, dear. I'll move them." From that moment on, I knew Lisa and I were not going to get along. She had a way of making everyone around her uncomfortable, always pointing out flaws and issues that no one else seemed to notice or care about. Part 2. The Growing Tensions. Over the next few weeks, Lisa's behavior only got worse. She would leave passive-aggressive notes on everyone's doors about noise levels, cleanliness, and even the way we parked our cars. It felt like we were all walking on eggshells, trying not to set her off. One evening, as I was returning home from work, I saw Lisa standing in the hallway, arms crossed and glaring at me. "Tom, we need to talk," she said, her voice icy. "Sure, what's up?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Your music is too loud. I can hear it through the walls, and it's very disruptive," she snapped. I was taken aback. I never played my music loudly, and I had never had any complaints from my other neighbors. "I'll make sure to keep it down," I replied, not wanting to escalate the situation. But it did not matter what I did. No matter how quiet I was, Lisa always found something to complain about. She started banging on my door at odd hours, claiming I was making too much noise. It felt like I was living in a prison, constantly on edge, waiting for her next outburst. Part 3. The Breaking Point. 1. Saturday afternoon, I decided I had had enough. I was sitting in my living room, trying to enjoy a movie, when there was a loud banging on my door. I opened it to find Lisa standing there, looking furious. "Tom, I know you're the one who left that trash in the hallway," she accused. "What are you talking about? I have not left any trash anywhere," I replied, trying to keep my cool. "Do not lie to me. I saw you," she insisted. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Lisa, I do not know what you think you saw, but I did not leave any trash in the hallway." "Fine, but if I catch you doing it again, there will be consequences," she threatened, before storming off. I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling my frustration boiling over. This was getting out of hand. I decided to talk to the landlord about her behavior, hoping he could do something to rein her in. Part 4. The Unexpected Break-In. A few days later, I returned home from work to find my front door slightly ajar. My heart sank, and I cautiously pushed it open, stepping inside. My apartment was a mess. Drawers were pulled out, papers scattered everywhere, and my personal belongings strewn about. I called the police immediately, fearing a break-in. As I waited for them to arrive, I noticed something odd. There were no signs of forced entry. It was almost as if someone had used a key to get in. When the police arrived, they conducted a thorough investigation but found no clear evidence of who might have done this. They took my statement and promised to look into it, but I could tell they did not hold out much hope of finding the culprit. As I started to clean up the mess, I could not shake the feeling that Lisa had something to do with this. She was the only person in the building who seemed to have it out for me. But without any proof, I was stuck. Part 5. The confrontation. Determined to get to the bottom of things, I decided to confront Lisa directly. I waited until the next morning and knocked on her door. She answered, looking annoyed to see me. "What do you want?" she snapped. "I know you broke into my apartment," I said bluntly. Her eyes widened for a moment before she composed herself. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Do not play dumb, Lisa. You are the only one who has a problem with me, and you have been causing trouble since you moved in," I accused. She crossed her arms and glared at me. "Prove it." I realized I had no concrete evidence, and without it, I could not do much. Frustrated, I turned and walked away, feeling defeated. Part 6. Seeking help. Feeling desperate, I decided to talk to some of my other neighbors. I needed to know if anyone else had experienced similar issues with Lisa. I started with Mrs. Jenkins, who was always friendly and approachable. "Mrs. Jenkins, have you had any problems with Lisa?" I asked. "Oh dear, where do I begin?" she sighed. "She has been nothing but trouble since she moved in. She even accused me of stealing her mail once." Hearing this made me feel a little better, knowing I was not alone. I spoke with a few more neighbors, and it turned out Lisa had been causing problems for almost everyone in the building. We decided to band together, and talked to the landlord, hoping he would take our concerns seriously. Part 7. Resolution. We arranged a meeting with the landlord and presented our grievances. He listened patiently as we each recounted our experiences with Lisa. When we finished, he nodded thoughtfully. "I had no idea things had gotten this bad," he admitted. "I will talk to Lisa and see what can be done. If she does not change her behavior, I may have to take more serious action." A few days later, the landlord informed us that he had spoken to Lisa and given her a warning. She was furious, of course, but knowing that the entire building was against her seemed to have a calming effect. She stopped her constant complaints and confrontations, and things slowly returned to normal. Life in the building became peaceful once more, and I was able to relax in my apartment without fear of being harassed. It had been a tough few months, but with the support of my neighbors, we had managed to stand up to Lisa and reclaim our home.